Nathaniel nodded, finishing the last of his whiskey before setting the glass down with a soft clink. He appreciated the consistency, both in his drink and in Weston's unwavering loyalty. Rising from his heavy leather chair, he straightened his crisp white shirt and moved toward the door. In the softly lit hallway, framed family photos created a sense of warmth amid the cool efficiency that Nate insisted upon in every other aspect of his home. He walked with purpose, his footsteps echoing as he approached the foyer. Vanessa entered, her honey blonde hair damp from the rain, a hint of fatigue shadowing her radiant smile. She slipped off her heels, kicking them gently aside before noticing Nate standing by the grand staircase. "Hey," she greeted, her laugh brightening the room despite the late hour. "Sorry I'm late. I lost track of time with Maya at the gallery." Nate smiled, his stern facade softening. "You know you don't have to explain. I trust you." He moved closer, brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. Vanessa's eyes searched his face, lingering a moment on the scar along his jaw. "Thank you," she whispered, "for always believing in me." He wrapped his arms around her in a gentle embrace, closing the gap between their worlds. In that moment, surrounded by their shared history, it was easy to believe that their bond was unbreakable. Weston, watching quietly from the shadowed doorway, offered a nod of reassurance before excusing himself for the night, leaving the couple to the quiet sanctuary of home. "That's the third time this week she's returned after 11. Nate nodded, his face betraying nothing. "And the GPS tracker, same location as before, the lakeside apartments on Westbrook Avenue." Nate took a slow sip of his whiskey. The children had been on his mind. "Leo asked when you'd be home again for dinner. Chloe drew you a picture of your fishing trip. I put it on your desk." Nate's eyes found the colorful drawing, stick figures by a blue pond. His heart, so carefully guarded against the world's blows, ached for a moment. "Schedule cleared for tomorrow." "Yes, sir. As requested." "Good. Let's see what my wife has been up to." Beneath the surface, something dangerous was stirring in Nate Pearson, a side of him that had lain dormant since his military days, a side that his enemies had learned to fear and that his wife had never seen. The next morning, Nate sat across from Vanessa at their expansive kitchen island, watching her carefully apply her makeup in a compact mirror. At 39, Vanessa still maintained the beauty that had first caught his eye, though the innocence he'd once perceived was long gone. "Early meeting again?" he asked casually, noting her designer outfit, far more formal than her job as a part-time event coordinator would require. "Yes," she replied absently. "The Harrison wedding is becoming a nightmare. Might be late again tonight." Nate nodded, taking a measured sip of his coffee. "I thought I'd take the kids fishing this weekend. Leo's been asking." Vanessa's eyes flashed with momentary panic before she controlled her expression. "Oh, this weekend won't work. My mother needs help with the cottage. I promised I'd take the kids." "Your mother hired a property manager last month," Nate replied evenly. "Remember, you complained about his fees." Vanessa's makeup compact snapped shut. "Well, there are still things she needs help with. You know how she is." "I do," Nate said, his voice taking on a slight edge. "Better than you might think." Something in his tone made Vanessa pause, but she quickly recovered. "I need to run. Can you drop the kids at school? Chloe has ballet after, and Leo has coding club until 5. "Of course," Nate replied. "After all, that's what a father does." After Vanessa left, Nate made breakfast for the children, packed their lunches, and drove them to school, all while maintaining perfect composure. Only Weston, watching from the security feeds, could see the dangerous stillness that had settled over his boss, the calm before a devastating storm. For 3 weeks, Nate meticulously gathered intelligence like he was preparing for a military operation. His background made him dangerous, not just for his physical capabilities, but for his patience and thoroughness. He had always told his clients that security breaches happened when emotion overrode logic. Now, he applied that same principle to his personal life. Lakeside Apartments, Unit 412, was registered to one Dominic Rousseau, a name Nate recognized immediately. Dominic was a judge's son who had failed the bar exam 3 times before his father's connection secured him a cushy position at the district attorney's office. He was also the man Vanessa had introduced at last year's charity gala as an old friend from college. Credit card statements revealed regular charges at high-end restaurants and boutique hotels across state lines, always on days when Vanessa claimed to be working late or visiting her sister in Portland. Phone records showed hundreds of texts and calls to a number registered under a fake name, but traced back to Dominic's personal cell. Most stunning of all were the recordings. Nate had installed state-of-the-art security throughout their home years ago, ostensibly for protection, but in reality, Nate trusted no one completely. The system captured Vanessa on multiple occasions, speaking in hushed tones about their finances, Nate's schedule, and their future plans. He suspects nothing. Vanessa had whispered during one call, "He's too busy with work, and the kids to notice anything. Another year, maybe 2, and we'll have everything in place." The real gut punch came when Nate discovered what everything entailed. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan to systematically destroy him. Nate learned that Dominic wasn't just getting close to his wife. He was actively using his position in the district attorney's office to build a case against Nate's company. They were meticulously fabricating evidence of illegal surveillance operations, planning to use it for both criminal charges and a devastating divorce settlement that would strip Nate of his children, his company, and his freedom. The final piece came when Nate hacked into Vanessa's cloud storage and found a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were doctored images, manipulated audio files, and a detailed timeline for when to deploy them. All of it was designed to paint Nate as an abusive, controlling husband who used his security expertise to terrorize his family. On a rainy Thursday evening, while Vanessa claimed to be at a client meeting, Nate sat in his study, reviewing the evidence one final time. He had enough to confront her, enough to destroy her plans, but something held him back. The same tactical mind that had kept him alive in hostile territory now cautioned patience. There was more to uncover. "How much longer are you going to watch this play out?" Weston asked, standing at the edge of the study with a grim expression. "Until I have everything," Nate replied, his voice cold and detached. "They're not just trying to divorce me, Weston. They want to destroy me, take my children, and put me in prison. What about the kids? They shouldn't be around her if she's planning all this." Nate's jaw tightened. "That's the only reason I haven't confronted her yet. I need to ensure the children are protected." And after that, a dangerous smile, one Weston recognized from their military days, crossed Nate's face. "After that, I'll show Vanessa and her lover what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." The confrontation, when it finally came, was executed with the same precision as all of Nate's operations. He chose a Sunday evening when the children were at a sleepover with friends. He arranged the evidence methodically across his study, printed photos, transcripts of recordings, financial records, all laid out like an intelligence briefing. When Vanessa returned from her charity committee meeting, Nate was waiting in the living room, a glass of her favorite wine poured and waiting. "You're home," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I thought you were taking the Thompson security contract proposal to Denver tonight." "I rescheduled," Nate replied calmly. "I thought we should talk." I poured your favorite. Weariness flickered across Vanessa's face, but she took the glass and sat across from him. "What did you want to talk about?" "How long have you been spending time with Dominic Rousseau?" Nate asked directly, his eyes steady and unblinking. The question, delivered in the same tone one might use to ask about the weather, caused Vanessa to choke on her wine. For a moment, panic flashed in her eyes before she composed herself. "What are you talking about? Dom is just a friend from college." "Yes, I know you've mentioned that." Nate's voice remained perfectly level. "What you didn't mention were the hotel rooms in Vermont, the apartment on Westbrook, or the detailed plan to frame me for crimes I didn't commit." Color drained from Vanessa's face. "You've been spying on me." "No, Vanessa. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." Nate stood up slowly. "My study." Now, in the study, Vanessa's composure crumbled as she faced the mountain of evidence. Her betrayal, laid bare in photographs, transcripts, and financial records, was undeniable. "How did you?" "I spent my life identifying threats and neutralizing them." Nate cut in. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice when the threat was living in my own home?" Vanessa's shock quickly morphed into calculated desperation. "Nate, this isn't what it looks like. Dom and I, we're just friends. These recordings, they're taken out of context." "Stop." The single word, spoken softly but with unmistakable menace, silenced her instantly. "You're not just spending time with him. You're conspiring with him to destroy me and take my children. The affair I could almost understand. People are weak. But trying to frame me, planning to separate me from Leo and Chloe." His voice took on a deadly edge. "That's something I will never forgive." "You don't understand," Vanessa pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I feel trapped in this marriage. You control everything. The money, the schedule, even the security cameras watching my every move." "The cameras that caught you discussing how to falsify abuse allegations," Nate replied coldly, picking up a transcript. "Or the ones that recorded you telling Dominic that once the judge sees these photos, Nate will never see the kids again." Vanessa's expression hardened, her tears drying up instantly. The mask of the victimized wife fell away, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "You have no idea what you're up against," she hissed. "Dominic's father has judges and police in his pocket. By the time we're done, you'll be lucky to get supervised visitation in a prison meeting room." Nate smiled, a cold, terrifying expression that made Vanessa take an involuntary step back. "I was hoping you'd drop the act," he said quietly. "It makes what comes next much easier." "What are you going to do?" Fear crept into her voice. "Nothing yet," Nate replied, gathering the evidence into a folder. "But you should know something about me, Vanessa. Something you seem to have forgotten." He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't lose. Not when it comes to my children. Not ever." "You can't win against Dominic's connections," she spat. "We'll see." Nate walked to the door. "I've taken the liberty of moving your things to the guest room. You'll stay there until I decide what happens next. The children don't need to know anything yet." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "You think you can control this situation like you control everything else. You've already lost, Nate. You just don't know it yet." Nate paused at the doorway. "One last thing. If you try to take the children or contact Dominic while staying in this house, what happens next will make your worst nightmares seem like sweet dreams." That night, lying awake in his bed, Nate didn't feel the pain or heartbreak one might expect. Instead, a cold, calculating clarity washed over him. In his mind, Vanessa was no longer his wife, but an enemy combatant who had declared war on him and threatened what he loved most. And in war, Nate Pearson had never shown mercy to his enemies. Vanessa made her move 3 days later, while Nate was at a meeting with a potential client. He received an urgent call from Weston. "She's gone." Took a suitcase and the kids, left a note saying she's filing for emergency custody based on concerns for their safety. Nate's hand tightened around his phone. "Tracker. Already on it. She disabled the GPS on her phone, but we got eyes on her car heading east on Highway 16. Let me guess, toward Judge Russo's district." "Exactly. And Nathaniel, she took files from your office. The security footage shows her copying data from your computer onto a drive." Nate ended the call and excused himself from the meeting. By the time he reached his car, he had already called his lawyer, Benjamin Mercer, a sharp-minded former prosecutor who had grown disillusioned with the system and now used his insider knowledge to fight it. "They're going to file for emergency custody," Nate explained as he drove. "Probably claiming I made threats after discovering their affair." "Judge?" Benjamin asked. Almost certainly Alexander Rousseau, Dominic's father. Christ, Benjamin's voice was grim. That complicates things. Rousseau's notorious for rubber stamping his son's requests. If they get an emergency hearing today, Nate cut in. They've been planning this. Then we need to be ready to counterfile immediately. I'll draft the motions now. Meet me at my office in 30. By late afternoon, Nate's prediction had come true. A sheriff's deputy delivered temporary emergency custody papers granted by Judge Alexander Rousseau, citing credible threats to the safety and well-being of the minor children, and ordering Nate to stay at least 500 feet from Vanessa and the children pending a formal hearing. Benjamin reviewed the documents with a scowl. They're claiming you threatened her with your military training and surveillance equipment after discovering her alleged affair. The evidence is her testimony, and some conveniently timed texts she sent to her mother expressing fear. When's the hearing? Next Friday, 9 days from now. Nate nodded, his mind already formulating plans. That's enough time. Benjamin gave him a concerned look, sensing the determination and storm brewing behind his client's calm facade. Enough time for what, Nathaniel? You need to be extremely careful here. One wrong move, and you'll never see your kids again. I'm always careful, Nate replied. But I'm not going to sit back while they use my children as pawns. For the next week, Nate operated with meticulous precision. Publicly, he was the model of compliance, staying away from the family home, communicating only through his lawyer, and following every court order to the letter. Privately, he was orchestrating a counterattack that would destroy Vanessa and Dominic's carefully constructed plan. First, he deployed a team to install additional security around his property, ostensibly for his own protection, but strategically positioned to capture any activity around the perimeter. He suspected Vanessa or Dominic might try to plant additional evidence, and he wanted to document it. Next, he focused on Judge Rousseau. Through discreet channels, Nate uncovered the judge's pattern of favorable rulings for his son's cases, not just custody matters, but criminal cases where Dominic was the prosecutor. Statistical analysis showed that defendants facing Dominic as prosecutor and appearing before Judge Rousseau had a 94% conviction rate, compared to the district average of 62%. Most importantly, Nate accessed the encrypted backup of all the security footage from his home. Footage Vanessa thought she had erased when she stole his files. What she didn't know was that Nate maintained triple redundancy for all security data, with one set stored on a server accessible only to him. The night before the custody hearing, Nate sat in his temporary apartment, reviewing the case with Benjamin. The lawyer looked troubled. I've tried every procedural angle to get the case moved to another judge, but Rousseau's denied all motions. We're stuck with him. Nate nodded calmly. I expected that. Then you should also expect to lose tomorrow, Benjamin said bluntly. Rousseau won't care about evidence or fairness. This is his son's girlfriend we're talking about. I'm aware, Nate replied. Benjamin studied his client carefully. You don't seem particularly worried. I'm not. Why do I get the feeling you have something planned that you're not telling me about? Nate smiled slightly. Because I always have something planned. Just be prepared to file for an immediate appeal and reconsideration of custody after tomorrow's hearing. You know something I don't, Benjamin pressed. I know many things you don't, Nate replied evenly. That's why you're my lawyer and not my tactical advisor. The hearing went exactly as predicted. Judge Rousseau barely glanced at the evidence Nate's team presented, dismissed witness testimony about Vanessa's pattern of unexplained absences, and refused to hear expert analysis of the allegedly threatening texts, which showed clear signs of fabrication. When the judge finally rendered his decision, his voice was cold and final. Instead, he focused on character testimony from Dominic himself, who spoke at length about Nate's supposed obsession with surveillance and his military background, painting him as unpredictable and dangerous when angered. When the ruling came, it was devastating but expected. Full custody to Vanessa, supervised visitation for Nate pending completion of anger management and parenting classes, and a continued restraining order preventing Nate from coming within 500 feet of the family home. As they left the courthouse, Benjamin was fuming. That was a travesty, a complete mockery of justice. Nate, however, remained calm. It was predictable. How can you be so composed? You just lost custody of your children. Temporarily, Nate corrected. File the appeal as we discussed. Before Benjamin could respond, Nate's phone buzzed with a text message from Vanessa. Stay away from your kids. Judge granted full custody. You're done. Nate read the message, his expression unchanged. Then he typed a firm reply. Open your doorbell app. Putting his phone away, he turned to Benjamin. Call Judge Lancaster's office. Tell them we have evidence of judicial misconduct that requires immediate attention. Use the private number I gave you. Benjamin looked confused. Lancaster, she's on the ethics committee, but what evidence are you talking about? It's being delivered to her as we speak, Nate replied, walking toward his car. And make that call I mentioned earlier. It's time. Vanessa was still smirking at her phone when the doorbell app notification pinged. Probably Nate begging to see the kids, she thought smugly. The victory in court had been even more complete than she and Dominic had anticipated. Judge Russo had been particularly harsh in his assessment of Nate's character, setting the stage for the criminal allegations they planned to bring next. She opened the app casually, expecting to see Nate standing pathetically on her doorstep. Instead, the screen showed nothing but her empty porch. Frowning, she checked the notification again and realized it wasn't a live feed, but a saved clip from 2 nights ago. Curious, she played the video. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m. On the screen, Vanessa herself appeared, fumbling with her keys as Dominic pressed against her from behind, kissing her neck as they returned from their celebration dinner. We've got him, Dominic was saying, his words slightly slurred from champagne. Dad assured me the custody hearing is just a formality. He's already decided. I expected at least a fight, Vanessa replied, turning to kiss him. Nate usually never gives up so easily. Dominic laughed. The fabricated texts were a nice touch, making it look like he threatened you after discovering the affair. Classic. And those doctored photos of bruises. Your dad ate it up. The best part, Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the high-end doorbell camera captured perfectly, is that he thinks this is just about custody. He has no idea what's coming next. Once the criminal charges stick, he'll be behind bars for years. By then, we'll have full custody, and he'll be lucky to get supervised visits in a prison meeting room. Dominic grinned, pulling her closer. You're brilliant, Vanessa. Absolutely brilliant. Vanessa smiled, her eyes gleaming with triumph. And once he's out of the picture, we can finally be together without any interference. The kids will be ours, and we can start our new life. Dominic nodded, his hands roaming over her body. I can't wait. But for now, let's enjoy our victory. As the video played, Vanessa's face paled. She watched in horror as the evidence of her betrayal unfolded before her eyes. The doorbell camera had captured every incriminating word, every damning gesture. She felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead as the realization of what this meant sank in. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Nate. I hope you enjoyed your little celebration. Now let's see how you handle the consequences. Vanessa's hands trembled as she tried to call Dominic, but her fingers fumbled over the keys. She needed to warn him, to figure out a way to spin this in their favor. But as she listened to the phone ring, she knew it was already too late. Nate had outmaneuvered them, and now they were the ones facing the consequences of their actions. He has no idea we're setting him up for criminal charges next. By the time we're done, Dominic added, Sentinel Shield will be mine to sell. His assets will fund our new life, and he'll be watching the kids grow up through prison visit class. They both laughed as they entered the house, the door closing behind them. Vanessa's blood ran cold. With shaking hands, she replayed the video, hoping desperately that she had misheard or misunderstood. But there it was, in crystal clear 4K resolution with perfect audio. Her entire plot with Dominic, confessed on her own doorstep. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "We won. Celebrating tonight." Before she could respond, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Mrs. Pearson?" a stern voice asked. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Judge Lancaster. I've just received some disturbing evidence regarding your custody hearing. I need you to come to my chambers immediately. Bring your lawyer." Vanessa's heart pounded in her chest. "What evidence? What are you talking about?" "Just come to my chambers, Mrs. Pearson. We need to discuss this matter urgently." The line went dead, leaving Vanessa staring at her phone in shock. She knew exactly what evidence Judge Lancaster was referring to, and she knew she was in deep trouble. She quickly dialed Dominic, but he didn't answer. Panic surged through her as she realized she was on her own. She grabbed her keys and rushed out the door, her mind racing with desperate plans to save herself and Dominic from the impending storm. But as she drove to the courthouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. Nate had outmaneuvered them, and now they were the ones facing the consequences of their actions. "Pearson," a formal voice asked when she answered. "This is Clerk Matthews from Judge Lancaster's chambers at the Circuit Court. You've been served with notice for an emergency hearing tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. regarding case number FC 29845, custody of minor children Leo and Chloe Pearson. Your presence is mandatory." "What? There must be some mistake," Vanessa stammered. "We just had the hearing today. Judge Russo already ruled." "Yes, Mom. This is a separate matter before Judge Lancaster regarding evidence of potential judicial misconduct. The hearing has been called at the request of the Judicial Ethics Committee. Again, your presence is mandatory." The call ended, leaving Vanessa staring at her phone in horror. With trembling fingers, she called Dominic. "Did you just get a call about another hearing?" she demanded when he answered. "What? No, I'm heading into a meeting with." "Check your email right now," she snapped. The silence on the other end lingered until Dominic spoke again, his voice tense. "I found it. This is impossible. My father's rulings can't be overturned like this. Someone's messing with us." "The doorbell camera," Vanessa whispered. "Nate has video of us discussing everything. The fake evidence, your father's predetermined ruling, our plans for the criminal charges. Everything." "That's impossible," Dominic insisted. "We swept the house for surveillance before you filed. There was nothing at the front door." "Well, he has it. He just sent it to me, and apparently to Judge Lancaster too." "Calm down," Dominic said, though his own voice had lost its usual confidence. "My father will handle this." "Lancaster can't. Your father is named in the ethics complaint," Vanessa nearly screamed. "Did you even read the email? They're investigating him for judicial misconduct and cases involving you." In his temporary apartment, Nate calmly poured himself a glass of whiskey as he watched multiple surveillance feeds on his laptop. One showed Vanessa pacing frantically in the living room of what had been his family home. Another displayed the parking garage where Dominic Russo was practically running to his car, phone pressed to his ear. A third feed showed Judge Alexander Russo receiving papers from a court officer at his chambers, his face growing increasingly pale as he read. The chessboard had shifted, and Nate knew the next move belonged to him. Nate's phone rang. "It's done," Benjamin reported. Judge Lancaster was appalled by the video evidence. "She's convened an emergency hearing for tomorrow and has already notified the Judicial Ethics Committee. Russo's been temporarily suspended pending investigation." "And the other matter?" Nate asked. "The district attorney received the complete file an hour ago. They're treating the conspiracy to commit fraud, evidence tampering, and perjury charges very seriously." Dominic's boss was particularly interested in the statistical analysis of conviction rates in his cases before his father. Nate nodded, satisfied. "Where do we stand on the children?" Lancaster has ordered them into temporary protective custody with your sister until tomorrow's hearing. The court officer should be picking them up from school now. Good. Make sure Lisa knows to keep their routine as normal as possible. Nathaniel, Benjamin said hesitantly. I've been your lawyer for 8 years. I've never seen you like this. Are you okay? Nate took a sip of his whiskey, watching as Vanessa collapsed onto the sofa, face in her hands. I'm fine, Benjamin. This isn't personal. It's your family. How can it not be personal? The moment they conspired to take my children, Nate replied coldly, they stopped being family and became targets. And I never miss a target. The next day's hearing was brief but consequential. Judge Lancaster, a stern woman with 30 years on the bench and a reputation for absolute integrity, reviewed the evidence with growing disgust. The doorbell camera footage was just the beginning. Nate's team presented forensic analysis of the text messages Vanessa claimed were threatening, showing they had been created after the fact. Phone records revealed coordinated calls between Judge Russo, Dominic, and Vanessa immediately before and after each filing in the case. Most damning were the financial records showing that Dominic had already contacted potential buyers for Sentinel Shield, Nate's company, even though he had no legal right to sell it. This is one of the most egregious abuses of the justice system I have witnessed in my career, Judge Lancaster declared. I am vacating all orders issued by Judge Russo in this matter and referring this case to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Turning to Vanessa, who sat ashen-faced beside her hastily acquired public defender, Judge Lancaster continued, Mrs. Pearson, your actions show a blatant disregard for the well-being of your children, whom you were willing to use as pawns in a scheme to defraud your husband. Pending criminal investigation, I am granting full temporary custody to Nathaniel Pearson. Vanessa started to protest, but her lawyer wisely placed a restraining hand on her arm. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am issuing a restraining order preventing you from approaching within 500 feet of the children or Mr. Pearson's residence until the criminal matters are resolved. As the hearing concluded, Vanessa caught Nate's eye across the courtroom. She saw nothing but the unyielding resolve of a man who had reclaimed everything that had been threatened. His expression remained impassive, giving away nothing of the satisfaction he felt at seeing her carefully constructed plan collapse around her. Outside the courthouse, Vanessa rushed toward him, her face contorted with fury and desperation. You set us up, she hissed. That doorbell camera wasn't there when we checked. I installed it the day after you moved out, Nate replied calmly. One of many precautions I took when I realized what you were planning. This isn't over, she threatened. My mother has connections. Dominic's father is being investigated by the state bar, Nate cut in. And Dominic has already been suspended from the DA's office, pending criminal charges. Vanessa's face crumpled. The children will be protected from you, Nate finished, as they should have been all along. You can't do this to me, she whispered. Nate leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. I didn't do this to you, Vanessa. You did it to yourself the moment you decided to use my children as weapons against me. And now you're learning what everyone who's ever crossed me discovers eventually. What's that? She asked, her voice barely audible. I don't fight to win, Nate said simply. I fight to destroy. The temporary victory in court was just the beginning of Nate's plan. While Vanessa and Dominic scrambled to defend themselves against potential criminal charges, Nate executed the next phase of his counterattack with methodical precision. First, he dealt with Diana Reynolds, Vanessa's mother. Diana had always disliked Nate, considering him beneath her daughter despite his success. She came from old money and had never approved of Vanessa marrying a man who, in her words, used his hands for a living. What Diana didn't know was that Nate had long ago uncovered her financial secrets, specifically that her old money had dried up years before Vanessa's marriage, and her lavish lifestyle was maintained through systematic tax fraud and identity theft targeting elderly clients of her charity foundation. Nate arranged a private meeting at her lake house, arriving precisely at the scheduled time. Diana greeted him with barely concealed contempt. "I suppose you're here to gloat," she said reluctantly, showing him into her expensively decorated living room. "Vanessa told me what you did." "Did she tell you what she did?" Nate asked mildly, declining the offered seat. "Conspiracy, perjury, attempted fraud." Diana waved a dismissive hand. "Marriages end, Nathaniel. Perhaps if you'd been more attentive." "This isn't about our marriage ending," Nate interrupted. "This is about her attempting to take my children through fraud and perjury." "Well, what did you expect? That she'd let you walk away with everything. The courts favor mothers. Everyone knows that." Nate smiled thinly. "Which is why she felt compelled to fabricate evidence and conspire with a corrupt judge." Diana's eyes narrowed. "What do you want? I assume you didn't come here to debate family law." "I want you to understand your position," Nate said, his voice hardening. "You've been actively supporting Vanessa and Dominic's conspiracy. Your testimony was scheduled for the next hearing before Judge Russo. Testimony I know for a fact would have been perjury. You can't prove." "I have the rehearsal on video," Nate cut in. "Dominic coaching you on what to say about my supposed threatening behavior that you never witnessed." Diana paled slightly but maintained her composure. "What do you want?" "I want you to cease all involvement in Vanessa's legal matters. No financial support, no testimony, no strategy sessions. You will not assist her in any way against me, or in trying to access the children." Diana laughed bitterly. "Or what? You'll sue me too. I have excellent lawyers." "No," Nate said calmly. "I'll send the evidence of your embezzlement from the Reynolds Foundation to the IRS and FBI, specifically the $2.7 million you diverted from donor funds to cover your personal expenses over the past decade." The color drained completely from Diana's face. "You're bluffing." Without a word, Nate removed a thumb drive from his pocket and placed it on the glass coffee table between them. "Everything is here. Bank transfers, falsified tax documents, the shell company you created to launder donations. My team is very thorough." "You scoundrel," Diana whispered. "I'm a scoundrel who protects what's his," Nate corrected. "My children will not be used as pawns by you or your daughter. Do we understand each other?" Diana nodded stiffly. "Good. Consider the evidence on that drive a copy. The originals remain secure and will be automatically sent to authorities if you disregard our agreement." As Nate turned to leave, Diana called after him. "She's still their mother. You can't keep them from her forever." Nate paused at the door. "I have no intention of keeping them from her forever, just until justice is served." Next, Nate focused on neutralizing Dominic's influence. Though Judge Russo had been temporarily suspended, the Russo family had deep connections throughout the legal community. Dominic's uncle sat on the state Supreme Court, and his mother chaired the Bar Association's Ethics Committee, a particularly ironic position given the circumstances. Rather than attacking these connections directly, Nate employed a more subtle approach. Using his contacts in private security and digital intelligence, he located every case Dominic had prosecuted where evidence might have been mishandled or where Judge Russo had made questionable rulings. There were dozens. Through anonymous tips to defense attorneys and carefully leaked documents to investigative journalists, Nate ensured that multiple cases were simultaneously brought under review. Within days, 3 major newspapers ran stories about potential systematic judicial misconduct in Judge Russo's courtroom, focusing particularly on cases involving his son as prosecutor. As a result, a wave of scrutinous attention swept through the city's legal community, and a sense of unease spread across the Russo family's once secure position. The State Bar Association, unable to ignore the mounting public pressure, announced a comprehensive review of all cases handled by both Russos over the past 5 years. Dominic's uncle recused himself from any involvement, and his mother took a leave of absence from the Ethics Committee. By the end of the week, Dominic had been formally suspended from the district attorney's office, pending investigation, and Judge Russo's temporary suspension had been extended indefinitely. Throughout this systematic dismantling of his enemies, Nate maintained his focus on what mattered most: Leo and Chloe. He worked with child psychologists to help them process the sudden changes in their lives, made efforts to maintain their routines as much as possible, and never spoke negatively about their mother in their presence. When Leo asked why they couldn't see their mom, Nate explained carefully. "Your mom and I are having some adult problems that need to be sorted out by the courts," he said gently. "Until that happens, the judge thought it would be best for you to stay with me." "Did Mom do something bad?" Chloe asked, her 9-year-old intuition picking up more than Nate had expected. "Everyone makes mistakes," Nate answered, choosing his words carefully. "Right now, the important thing is that you know both your mom and I love you very much." It was the one lie he allowed himself to tell. In truth, Nate had come to believe that Vanessa loved the children primarily as extensions of herself, tools to maintain her self-image as a devoted mother while she pursued her own desires. One evening, as he tucked Chloe into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mom getting a divorce?" Nate sat on the edge of her bed. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." "Is it because of Mr. Dominic? I saw him kissing Mom once when you were away." Nate's heart tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Partly, but sometimes adults just can't make things work together anymore." "Will we have to choose between you and Mom?" "No," Nate said firmly. "You don't have to choose. You get to love both of us always." After the children were asleep, Nate retreated to his study where Weston waited with updates. "Dominic's been formally charged," Weston reported. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, evidence tampering, perjury, and abuse of office. His father is facing judicial misconduct charges and likely disbarment." "And Vanessa?" Nate inquired. "Conspiracy and perjury charges have been filed. Her lawyer is pushing for a plea deal." Nate nodded. "Has she attempted to contact the children?" "3 times through her new lawyer, not Dominic. She's requesting supervised visitation." "Denied for now," Nate said coldly. "The children need stability while they adjust." Weston hesitated before asking, "How far do you intend to take this, Nate?" "As far as necessary. The charges already filed could put both of them away for years. Her mother staying out of it. The Russo family influence is crumbling. You've won." Nate turned to his oldest friend, his expression unwavering. "This isn't about winning, Weston. This is about justice. They didn't just try to end my marriage or take my money. They tried to take my children and my freedom through fraud and corruption. That deserves more than a tactical defeat." "What does it deserve?" Weston asked. Nate's eyes hardened. "Complete destruction. They need to understand that some lines can never be uncrossed." While the criminal cases against Vanessa and Dominic proceeded through the legal system, Nate implemented the most crucial phase of his plan. He'd won the first battle for custody, but he knew the war wasn't over. Eventually, Vanessa would find a sympathetic judge or manipulate her way back into the children's lives. She might even avoid significant jail time through plea bargains and first-time offender programs. Nate needed something more permanent. Evidence so damning that no court would ever grant her unsupervised access to the children again. For this, he turned to a specialized team from his company, Ethical Hackers, who typically tested security systems for vulnerabilities. Their assignment was straightforward but challenging. Gain access to all digital communications between Vanessa and Dominic without detection. "I need everything," Nate instructed Troy Winters, his lead digital security specialist. "Emails, texts, cloud storage. Anything that might contain their ongoing plans or reveal past schemes we haven't uncovered yet." Troy, a lanky 30-something with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and remarkable coding skills, looked uncomfortable. "Boss, we're talking about stuff that won't be admissible in court. Unauthorized access is." "I'm not looking for court evidence," Nate interrupted. "I'm looking for intelligence. Knowledge is leverage, Troy. I need to know what they're planning before they execute it." The team worked methodically, using sophisticated techniques to bypass security on Vanessa and Dominic's devices and accounts. What they discovered exceeded even Nate's expectations. Dominic and Vanessa's conspiracy went far beyond their plot against Nate. They had been planning similar schemes against other wealthy individuals, identifying potential targets, researching their vulnerabilities, and developing tailored approaches to exploit them. Most disturbing were their discussions about the children. In private messages, Vanessa repeatedly referred to Leo and Chloe as necessary collateral damage and useful pawns in their larger plan. In one particularly chilling exchange, she had written to Dominic, "Once we have control of Nate's assets, we can send the kids to boarding school. They're just reminders of him." Anyway, these revelations hardened Nate's resolve. This wasn't just about his own family anymore. Vanessa and Dominic were predators who had likely victimized others, and would continue to do so if not stopped permanently. Armed with this intelligence, Nate developed what he called the digital trap. It would require perfect timing, technical precision, and a bit of psychological manipulation, all areas where Nate excelled. First, he needed to establish seemingly secure communication channels that Vanessa and Dominic would trust. Through his team, he created vulnerabilities in their existing methods, while simultaneously ensuring they discovered what appeared to be secure alternatives, encrypted messaging apps and email services that, unknown to them, had been compromised from the start. Next, he needed to create circumstances that would push them to use these channels to discuss their ongoing schemes. For this, he leaked information suggesting that the criminal charges against them might be reduced or dismissed due to procedural errors. This false hope, combined with their natural tendency toward conspiracy, would likely prompt them to resume planning. Finally, he needed patience, allowing them enough time and rope to thoroughly incriminate themselves. The trap was set in late October, 3 months after the initial custody battle. By then, both Vanessa and Dominic were out on bail, their criminal cases moving slowly through the system. As Nate had predicted, they began using the compromised secure channels to discuss their next moves. "My lawyer thinks we can get the conspiracy charges reduced," Dominic wrote in what he believed was an encrypted message. "If we can paint this as a simple divorce gone wrong, rather than a premeditated scheme, we might avoid serious jail time." "What about custody?" Vanessa replied, "I need access to the children to maintain my public image as a devoted mother. Plus, it's our best leverage against Nate. We need to be patient. My father's connections aren't completely destroyed. Judge Harmon owes him favors, and he's presiding over family court next month, if we can get your case before him." The messages continued for weeks, detailing their plans to manipulate the legal system, use the children as bargaining chips, and eventually resume their scheme to seize Nate's assets. They also discussed other potential targets, wealthy individuals going through divorces who might be vulnerable to similar tactics. Nate monitored these exchanges with cold detachment, building a comprehensive file of their continuing criminal conspiracy. When the file reached a critical mass of incriminating evidence, he executed the final phase of his plan. On a crisp November morning, Nate made a phone call to his lawyer. "It's time," he said simply. "Contact the FBI's white-collar crime division. Use the secure channel we established." Benjamin's response was hesitant. "Nathaniel, are you certain? This will destroy them completely. There will be no coming back from this." "That's the point," Nate replied. "Some people can't be reformed, only removed from the board." "And the children, how will they handle seeing their mother arrested again, this time by federal agents?" "They won't see it," Nate assured him, his voice resolute as he stared out the window at the rising sun, ready to close this final chapter for good. "You son of a—" Nate raised a hand calmly, cutting her off. "Choose your next words carefully, Vanessa. Everything you say here is being recorded by the agents as part of the ongoing investigation." Her mouth snapped shut, anger and panic warring in her expression. Around them, the quiet murmur of the park's afternoon crowd faded as federal agents approached, 2 stepping up to the table. "Vanessa Reynolds Pearson," one agent asked, displaying his badge. Vanessa nodded stiffly, her hands clenching the edge of her chair. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, evidence tampering, wire fraud, and multiple counts of perjury. You have the right to remain silent." The words blurred together for Vanessa, shock stealing her voice as the agents gently but firmly placed her in handcuffs. As they led her toward an unmarked car, she looked back at Nate, fury and disbelief etched across her face. Nate remained seated, his expression steady and unreadable, watching as justice finally closed in. He took a slow sip of his coffee, the autumn sun glinting off the river behind him, a sense of completion settling over him at last. When Vanessa disappeared from sight, Nate stood, left enough cash for both coffees, and walked from the park with measured steps. He felt no triumph, only relief. The battle for his children's futures had ended, not with vengeance, but with calculated, irrefutable justice. With the final phase complete, Nate returned home, determined to give Leo and Chloe the peace and stability they deserved. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain. He would always protect what mattered most, no matter the cost. The federal agent addressed her firmly. "Vanessa Reynolds Pearson, you are under arrest." Vanessa barely managed to whisper, "Nathaniel." Her voice trembled with disbelief and despair, the full weight of her choices crashing down in one unbearable moment. Nate stood as the agents guided Vanessa away, watching with a calm resolve. He understood there would be hard days ahead for his children, questions to answer and wounds to heal. But as he left the park, and the sirens faded into the distance, he knew he had kept his promise, to protect his family from harm, no matter what it cost him. Above all, Nate hoped that this would be the lesson his children remembered. That truth, courage, and love for family meant standing firm, even against those closest to you. And in the quiet aftermath, beneath the late autumn sky, Nathaniel Pearson finally allowed himself a deep, steadying breath. The storm had passed. Justice had prevailed. One of the agents approached their table. "I'm Special Agent Morales with the FBI. We need you to come with us." "On what charges?" Vanessa demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, attempted extortion, and racketeering under the RICO Act." The agent replied calmly. "The full indictment will be provided to you upon arraignment." As the agents led Vanessa away in handcuffs, she turned back to Nate, her face a mask of hatred. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," Nate replied, his voice carrying just enough for her to hear. "You chose the wrong person to target, Vanessa. I don't fight to win. I fight to end threats permanently." Later that evening, Nate received confirmation that Dominic had also been arrested, along with Judge Russo, and 2 other associates involved in their schemes. The federal investigation had expanded beyond his family situation to encompass all of their fraudulent activities, a much wider net than even Nate had anticipated. As he sat in his study reviewing the reports, Weston entered with 2 glasses of whiskey. "It's done," Weston said, handing Nate a glass. "Federal RICO charges carry 20-year minimums. With the evidence you provided, they'll likely serve at least 15, even with good behavior and plea deals." Nate nodded, taking the glass. "And the children's future is secure." "Was it worth it?" Weston asked quietly. "The resources, the time, the emotional toll." Nate considered the question as he swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "They threatened everything I care about, Weston. They planned to take my children, destroy my company, and put me in prison, all while smiling to my face. What would you have done?" Weston nodded slowly. "Probably the same, but with less precision and more violence." A rare smile crossed Nate's face. "That's why I plan the operations, and you execute them." They clinked glasses in a silent toast to a mission completed. The federal indictments against Vanessa, Dominic, and their co-conspirators sent shockwaves through their social and professional circles. What had begun as a contentious divorce and custody battle had evolved into one of the largest fraud and racketeering cases in the state's recent history. As the investigation expanded, federal agents uncovered evidence that the conspiracy extended far beyond Nate's case. Dominic had been using his position in the DA's office to identify vulnerable wealthy individuals going through divorces or legal troubles. Vanessa would then approach them socially, sometimes initiating affairs while gathering information that could be exploited. Judge Russo would ensure favorable rulings, and their network of corrupt attorneys and financial advisors would help strip the victims of their assets. The morning after the arrests, Nate's phone began ringing incessantly. Diana Reynolds had been trying to reach him since midnight, her calls increasing in frequency and desperation. Finally, at 8:00 a.m., Nate answered. "What did you do?" Diana demanded, her voice thick with shock and panic. "Dominic made some choices that hurt a lot of people, including our family. The government is handling things now because their actions didn't just affect us, but others as well." Leo's brow furrowed. "Is she going to jail forever?" Nate sighed softly, putting a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "I don't know for sure, buddy. She'll have people helping her, and the courts will decide what happens next. But what matters most right now is that you and your sister are safe, and you'll always have family you can count on. You're not mad at me for looking up the news, are you?" "No, Leo. I'd rather you come to me when you have questions, no matter what. We'll get through this together. Remember, I love you and your sister more than anything in this world. None of what's happening now changes that." Leo nodded, tears prickling his eyes but refusing to fall. Nate pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly. "We'll be okay, Dad." Nate gave him a small but steady smile. "Yes, Leo. We'll be okay. We'll take it one day at a time. As a family." In that quiet moment, as the weight of months of conflict began to melt away within the circle of his arms, Nate knew he'd done what he had to for his children. As difficult as the road had been, he would walk it again without hesitation, because some battles were fought for the sake of love, and that, above all, was a cause worth any cost. Dominic had been accused of doing some very wrong things. The courts will decide if those accusations are true. Did they really try to take all your money and send us away? Nate hesitated, weighing the value of honesty against protecting his son's relationship with his mother. They made some plans that wouldn't have been good for our family. But what's important now is that you and Chloe are safe, and that you know I'll always protect you. Are we ever going to see Mom again? Leo's voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, Nate replied carefully, but it might be a while. And things will be different. The important thing to remember is that none of this is your fault, or Chloe's fault. Leo nodded slowly, processing this information with the same analytical mind that Nate recognized from his own approach to problems. "Dad, are you okay? You never seem upset about any of this." The question caught Nate off guard. He'd been so focused on executing his plan and protecting the children that he hadn't considered how his emotional control might appear to them. "I am upset," he admitted, "but I've learned that letting emotions control your actions rarely leads to good decisions. Sometimes staying calm is the strongest thing you can do." Leo managed a small smile at that, as if reassured by his father's candor. "I'm glad you're my dad." Nate squeezed his son's shoulder, feeling the weight in his own chest lessen just a little. "I'm proud to be your dad, Leo. Always." With the crisis waning and his children finally at peace, Nate allowed himself to hope for a future free of shadows, a life where the only battles left to fight would be the everyday struggles of family, love, and healing. And he knew with certainty that together they would face whatever came next. "She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. We need to be prepared for anything." Weston nodded, his expression grim. "I'll double the security detail around the clock. No one gets near the kids without my approval." "Good. And make sure the federal agents are aware of the threat. I want them involved in the security measures." "Already on it," Weston replied, his fingers flying over his phone as he coordinated with the federal agents. "They're sending additional agents to monitor the perimeter and keep an eye on any unusual activity." Nate leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. We need to be proactive. Vanessa won't go down without a fight. She'll try to manipulate the situation, use any leverage she thinks she has. What about her mother? Weston asked. Diana Reynolds might still be a wild card. She's been warned, Nate said coldly. If she tries to interfere, she'll face the consequences. We can't afford to leave any loose ends. Weston nodded. I'll keep a close eye on her too. If she makes a move, we'll be ready. Nate stood, his resolve hardening. This isn't over until Vanessa is behind bars and the children are safe. We can't let our guard down for a second. Understood, Weston replied, his voice steady and determined. We'll keep them safe, Nate, no matter what it takes. As Weston left to implement the enhanced security measures, Nate sat back down, his thoughts turning to the children. He needed to ensure they felt safe and loved, despite the chaos surrounding them. He picked up his phone and dialed his sister Lisa. Lisa, it's Nate. Can you come over? I need to talk to you about the kids. Of course, Lisa replied, her voice warm and reassuring. I'll be right over. Nate ended the call, feeling a sense of relief. With Lisa's help, he could make sure Leo and Chloe knew they were loved and protected, no matter what happened next. As he waited for his sister to arrive, Nate steeled himself for the battle ahead. Vanessa might think she had one last card to play, but he was ready to counter every move she made. He would protect his children, no matter the cost. Let's bring him in and see what he knows. Morales listened intently, his voice grave. We'll need to move quickly and carefully. If this is connected to Vanessa, we can't risk tipping her off. I'll assemble a team to monitor and apprehend the suspect. In the meantime, stay vigilant. If he makes a move, we need to be ready. Nate nodded, even though Morales couldn't see him. Understood. We'll maintain our routines, but we'll be ready. Over the next 24 hours, the FBI team monitored the specialist's movements, confirming his intentions. They watched as he scouted potential ambush points, noting the times and routes Nate took with the children. The evidence was damning, and the FBI was ready to make their move. Early the next morning, as Nate was about to leave for his run, Agent Morales called. We're in position. Let's take him down. Nate acknowledged the call and set off on his usual route, the specialist following at a discreet distance. As Nate approached the designated ambush point, the FBI team sprang into action. Agents converged on the specialist, taking him down swiftly and efficiently. The specialist struggled briefly, but the agents had him restrained in seconds. As they led him away, Nate approached, his expression calm but determined. Who hired you? Nate asked, his voice steady. The specialist glared at him, saying nothing. Morales intervened. He'll talk. We have ways of making people talk. Nate nodded, satisfied. Make sure he understands the consequences of silence. We need everything he knows about who hired him and why. As the specialist was taken into custody, Nate turned to Morales. We need to move on Vanessa. This is our chance to end this once and for all. Morales agreed. We'll bring her in for questioning. With the specialist's testimony and the evidence we have, we should be able to build a strong case against her. Nate felt a sense of relief wash over him. The battle was far from over, but he knew they were finally on the path to true justice. Vanessa's schemes had been exposed, and her attempts to destroy him and his family would be met with the full force of the law. As he returned home, Nate found Leo and Chloe waiting for him, their faces filled with concern. He knelt down, pulling them into a tight embrace. It's going to be okay, he reassured them. We're going to make sure everything is safe and that you two are protected. Always. Leo looked up at him, his eyes filled with trust. We know, Dad. We trust you. Chloe nodded in agreement, her small hand squeezing his. We love you, Daddy. Nate's heart swelled with love and determination. He would do whatever it took to keep his children safe, to ensure they had the stable, happy life they deserved. And with the specialist in custody and Vanessa's schemes unraveling, he knew they were one step closer to that future. "I want to see the children," she demanded. "Before the trial. I need to explain." "No," Nate replied, his voice cold and absolute. "You forfeited that right the minute you tried to harm me and put your own children at risk. Everything you've done, every choice you made, is what brought us here. Your children are safe, and they'll stay that way." Vanessa's breath hitched, a tremor of something like desperation threading through her words. "Nathaniel, please, I'm still their mother." "You were their mother," Nate responded, "but you used them as pawns. You plotted to take them far away from everyone they know, and then you tried to take their father from them, permanently. They deserve better. Goodbye, Vanessa." He hung up, handing the phone back to Agent Morales, who nodded approvingly as additional charges were logged. Morales spoke quietly. "We'll make sure she has no contact with the children until a judge determines what, if any, contact is appropriate. You did everything you could, Mr. Pearson." Nate nodded, the gravity of it all settling on his shoulders. He wanted, more than anything, for his children to have the chance at peace after so much turmoil. As he left the FBI field office, the crisp air felt sharper, brighter. He thought of Leo and Chloe, of the promise he'd made to protect them. Out of darkness, he reminded himself, hope could grow again. And as Nate drove home, safe, resolute, and finally free from the shadows of betrayal, he knew that his children's future, hard-won and protected, would always be worth fighting for. She hesitated, her eyes glistening with a sadness Nate had never seen before. I want to do better by them, Nathaniel. And by you, if you'll let me." Nate regarded her for a long moment, searching for sincerity. "That starts with honesty, Diana. Both with yourself and with them. It's the only way forward." Diana nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Thank you. Truly." "Let's take it one day at a time," Nate said quietly. "The children need to heal. We all do." After their conversation, Nate walked out of the courthouse, the weight of years of conflict finally beginning to lift. There would still be questions, for Leo, for Chloe, and even for himself. Difficult conversations lay ahead. But for the first time, the path forward seemed less shadowed by fear and betrayal. That night, as he tucked Chloe into bed and found Leo quietly reading in his room, Nate felt a surge of cautious hope. The scars would remain, but they were a family, damaged, changed, but still together. He promised himself and his children that he would help them rebuild, brick by brick, with nothing but truth, patience, and unwavering love. In the end, that, much more than vengeance, was the real victory. As the second anniversary of the arrests approached, life had settled into a new normal for the Pearson family. Their home was quieter, steadier than it had ever been, with routines and familiar comforts filling the spaces once shaped by tension and uncertainty. Leo's laughter began drifting back into the house, lighter than it had been in the past year, and Chloe allowed herself more moments of joy and trust. Nate found solace in their company, in building steady habits and milestones he'd once taken for granted, sitting with Chloe while she braided friendship bracelets, taking early morning walks with Leo, cooking together even when their culinary efforts turned into fits of laughter over burnt toast. Sunday hikes continued, as did the small family traditions they built together. Quiet evenings by the fire, dog-eared board games, and Weston's gruff encouragement over pancakes on Saturdays. Diana kept her promise, arriving for her monthly supervised visits, tentative at first, but slowly growing more natural, making genuine efforts to connect with her grandchildren and respect the boundaries Nate had set. For the first time in years, Nate recognized what true peace felt like, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of safety, honesty, and earned trust within his home. On the night of the second anniversary, as a gentle rain tapped against the windows, Leo looked up from his homework and asked, "Dad, do you think we'll always be okay, even after everything?" Nate smiled, gathering both Leo and Chloe close. I do. We've been through the hardest parts together. No matter what comes, we'll always have each other. And that's enough. In that moment, quiet, steady, and real, the Pearson family found something even stronger than justice or victory. They found healing. And with it, the promise of brighter days ahead. Nate watched Leo engrossed in his project, a sense of quiet pride filling him. The journey had not been easy, but the transformation within their family was undeniable. Where pain and uncertainty had once ruled, now there was understanding and a hard-earned peace. Chloe, too, had blossomed in her creativity, finding hope and clarity in her writing. She poured her feelings onto the pages of her journals, pages she sometimes shared with her father, and sometimes kept just for herself. Each entry was a testament to her resilience, a reflection of the safe and loving environment Nate had fought to give both his children. Nate himself was no longer just the determined protector or the cold strategist. He'd become both parent and confidant, learning to sit in the discomfort of vulnerability and inhabit the softer spaces his children needed from him. He knew he could never erase the past, but he also knew he had equipped Leo and Chloe to carry what they had learned forward into adulthood, not with bitterness, but with strength and understanding. Years would pass, and reminders of the ordeal might occasionally shadow their lives, but Nate trusted in the foundation they'd rebuilt together. They understood that true healing wasn't about forgetting the pain of betrayal, but about choosing, day after day, to live fully in spite of it, and to find love and hope in one another. The final lesson Nate hoped they would carry was simple, but profound. No matter how deep the wounds, forgiveness, be it complete or partial, was a gift they could give themselves, and unwavering love was a shield against even the darkest storms. For the Pearson family, that truth would always endure. The end. She reached into her handbag and removed a sealed envelope, sliding it across the desk to Nate. This arrived for the children, Diana said, her voice low. It's from Vanessa. Officially, I'm supposed to pass it on to them, but I wanted you to see it first, to decide what should be done. Nate studied the envelope in silence, weighing its unexpected weight. He glanced up at Diana. Did you read it? She shook her head. No, I didn't think I had the right. I trust your judgment, Nathaniel. Completely. He nodded, the magnitude of that trust not lost on him. Thank you, Diana, for coming to me first. You did the right thing. For what it's worth, I truly hope she's changed, Diana said quietly. But I'm not risking my grandchildren's peace for hope alone. Neither am I, Nate thought, but he only said, I'll handle it. As Diana left the study, Nate sat for a long moment with the envelope between his hands, feeling the responsibility of his children's stability and future pressing upon him. He knew every decision he made now could shape Leo and Chloe's sense of security for years to come. After a moment's thought, he ran his thumb gently along the envelope's edge, considering whether to open it. He wasn't sure yet what he would do, but there was one thing he did know with unwavering certainty. As long as he was able, nothing and no one would threaten the healing his family had worked so hard to achieve. Outside, autumn sunlight slanted across the lawn, and somewhere down the hall, he heard Chloe's laughter. Steadying himself, Nate resolved to meet whatever came next the way he always had, one step at a time, guided by love, wisdom, and relentless protection for his children. Chloe was more emotionally conflicted, but equally determined. I might never understand why she did what she did, she confided to Nate one evening after rehearsal, but I know I don't want her in my life right now. Maybe that will change someday, but it's my choice, not hers. Nate listened, proud of her clarity but mindful of just how deeply the past had shaped his daughter's strength and caution. He assured Chloe that her feelings and boundaries would always be respected, and that whatever decision she made in the future would have his full support. Tactically, Nate resumed his discreet security protocols. He notified Weston, who immediately re-engaged his private surveillance networks, making sure to monitor for any signs that Dominic or Vanessa were attempting to orchestrate contact, directly or through intermediaries. Additional safeguards were quietly put in place at the children's schools, and Nate kept the authorities apprised of the recent communication between Vanessa and Dominic, ensuring any breach would trigger swift intervention. Still, even with all these measures, Nate resolved to keep his focus on the present. He celebrated Leo's growing independence, encouraged Chloe's creative pursuits, and welcomed Diana's ongoing efforts to be a positive grandmother. He held fast to their family's hard-won peace, determined never to let shadows from the past cloud the promise of their future. On the eve of Leo's graduation, as his family gathered for a quiet dinner filled with laughter and shared memories, Nate allowed himself a rare moment of hope. Whatever schemes Vanessa and Dominic might hatch in the future, he was ready, not out of fear or vengeance, but from the fierce, unwavering love of a father protecting his children. And as he looked around at the faces of those he cherished most, Nate knew, with unshakable certainty, that their story would never again be defined by betrayal, but by resilience, courage, and the enduring bond of family. He strengthened his company's legal position, documented every communication that could be construed as extortion, and quietly arranged for enhanced security around his family. He brought his executive team up to speed, ensuring that trustworthy, long-standing employees would alert him immediately to any legal filings or attempts to compromise Sentinel Shield's operations. Weston returned to overseeing both digital and physical security protocols, and Benjamin strategized with the company's legal department to prepare comprehensive counterclaims for any possible infringement or lawsuit Vanessa and Dominic might attempt. Privately, Nate spoke again with Leo and Chloe, letting them know, without unnecessary detail, that Vanessa might try to make trouble for their family after her release. He reassured them that she couldn't touch anything that mattered most to them: their home, their peace, their choices. Both children offered their support in return, older now and even more secure in the knowledge that their father was, above all, their protector. 2 days before Vanessa's scheduled parole hearing, Benjamin called with an update. Vanessa's new lawyer just filed a pre-litigation request for company financials and asset disclosures. She's trying to build the case she threatened in her letter. We're ready for whatever comes, but you should expect her to go public if she's denied what she wants. Nate's response was firm. Let her try. The truth is on our side, and I'm not going to negotiate away our future for her peace of mind. We'll fight this as long as it takes. On the morning of the parole hearing, Nate reviewed every piece of documentation, every line of defense. He stood at his home office window, watching autumn leaves drift across the yard. Leo and Chloe somewhere out of sight, but always present in his thoughts. He didn't know what Vanessa's freedom would bring, only that this time, he was truly ready for it. If there was another war to fight, he would meet it head-on, unflinching, unbreakable, and above all, unafraid. The shadows of the past could never reach far enough to threaten the future his family had built, and as Nate prepared for the next chapter, he knew that, whatever battles remained, he and his children would face them, with honesty, resilience, and the quiet certainty of those who had already survived the worst. The attack, when it came, targeted neither Nate nor the children directly. Instead, it began with Sentinel Shield. Early one morning, Nate's chief information officer alerted him to a series of sophisticated intrusion attempts on the company's secure servers. These were not amateur efforts. They bore the hallmarks of a professional, likely commissioned hacker. The attacks were designed not just to steal corporate secrets, but to plant evidence implicating Sentinel Shield in illegal surveillance and data breaches against past clients. Nate moved swiftly. He activated the company's highest-level countermeasures, called in his trusted digital security team, including veterans of the original crisis, and had his attorneys prepare preemptive filings documenting the exact nature and timing of the attempted breaches. Every attempted entry was meticulously logged. Every digital fingerprint was preserved. As the day unfolded, Nate traced a pattern. The attacks came from a series of compromised international servers. Despite the sophistication, a hidden signature was eventually found. A marker Nate's team recognized as the handiwork of a hacker Dominic had referenced in old prison correspondence, Riley nicknamed Archer. Vanessa's connection was quickly established through recently intercepted messages between her and an encrypted offshore email alias linked to Archer. With the evidence in hand, Nate moved strategically. He contacted law enforcement and Sentinel Shield's insurance investigators, sharing the chain of evidence and securing his company's position before any negative allegations could be made public. The next morning, the FBI's cybercrimes unit raided the apartment of an intermediary Vanessa had used to facilitate the hack. Within 48 hours, federal prosecutors moved to revoke Vanessa's parole and press new conspiracy charges. She was picked up outside a nondescript office where, surveillance later revealed, she had been meeting with a disbarred former attorney. The news broke by midday. Parolee arrested in plot to frame security firm. As the case built against her yet again, Nate called Leo, now moved into his MIT dorm, and Chloe, still at home, to update them. He kept the news simple and factual. Another consequence of choices made long ago by someone who still refused to change. Finally, one late evening, as Nate sat alone in his study reflecting on the relentless cycle, he realized just how much his family had survived, and how far they'd come. He knew with certainty that whatever new storm Vanessa might try to conjure, they'd weather it, together and unafraid. This time, the shadow from the past would find no purchase in their new life. "She doesn't see me as your father anymore," Nate explained gently. To her, "I'm just the obstacle in the way of whatever she thinks she's owed. I'm telling you this because, even though it hurts, understanding the reality lets us protect ourselves, now and in the future." Chloe drew her knees to her chest. "What happens when she gets out again?" Nate was quiet for a moment, his voice steady. "We'll handle it, the same way we've handled everything else, together, with honesty and with the law on our side. We'll keep careful records, and we'll rely on the safeguards we've built around our family and the company. I want you both to promise me. If anything ever feels off, if anyone tries to contact you or pressure you about me or our family, you come to me or Uncle Wes. No secrets, not ever." Leo nodded, his jaw set in determination. "We promise, Dad." Chloe, after a moment, echoed him. "We promise." Nate put a hand on each of their shoulders, feeling their strength and resolution, the very things he'd hoped to instill but had hardly dared to trust would come. "You've already proven how strong you are. I'm proud of you both." For the first time, the conversation closed not in tension or sadness, but with a sense of unity. As the three of them sat together in the quiet, Nate knew that the ghosts of the past, no matter how persistent, would never break the bond they had fought so hard to forge. Whatever challenges the future brought, the Pearson family would meet them as they always had, together, vigilant and unbreakable. Nate understood this truth from both his military days and his personal life. He knew that resilience wasn't about denying the existence of threats or pretending the past never happened. It was about acknowledging reality, arming yourself with knowledge and preparation, and then daring to live fully anyway. He watched Leo double-check the family's security settings before heading back to his room, and saw Chloe pause to offer him a quiet hug on her way upstairs. Both gestures spoke of trust and a hard-won maturity. These were not naive children anymore. They were survivors, shaped by hardship but not broken by it. As the house settled into evening calm, Nate stood by his study window, listening to the laughter trickling down from upstairs. There was always a shadow on the horizon, but there was also light and warmth inside these walls, proof that love and vigilance could coexist. Whatever storms might come, the Pearson family was prepared. They would continue building their lives, rooted in honesty, bravery, and an unbreakable bond. And should the enemy ever return, they would face her together, just as they always had, vigilant, united, and unafraid. Nate sat in his study, the soft hum of the house around him, a comforting reminder of the life he had fought so hard to protect. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had led him to this moment, surrounded by the love and resilience of his children, Leo and Chloe. He took a sip of his whiskey, the amber liquid warming his throat, a small comfort in the quiet of the night. The room, filled with the memories of countless nights spent planning, strategizing, and ultimately healing, felt like a sanctuary. This was where he had made the toughest decisions, where he had found the strength to fight for his family. The doorbell camera that had captured Vanessa's conspiracy had been just the beginning. The true power had come from Nate's unwavering commitment to justice and protection, no matter the cost. He had learned that protecting his children required not just tactical brilliance, but emotional honesty. He had opened himself up to them, showing vulnerability and love, and in doing so, had forged a bond that would never be broken. In the silent sanctuary of his study that night, after the children had gone to bed, Nate raised a glass of whiskey in a solitary toast, not to victory over Vanessa, but to the family that had emerged stronger from the crucible she had created. Some fires, after all, forged stronger bonds than they destroyed. As he took the final sip, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The shadows of the past would always be there, but they no longer held power over his present or his future. He had faced the darkness, and had come out stronger, and so had his children. And with that he turned off the light, leaving the study in darkness, ready to face whatever came next, with love, with strength, and with the unbreakable bond of family.